Hello once again to the fog, my delightful little ghouls and goblins. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and boy do I have something for you today. In Navajo folklore, they speak of witches and shamans called skinwalkers, men and women who are able to take the form of creatures they please and blend in amongst them. Could they still be walking among us today? Well, that's what we aim to find out. Here is top 5 unsettling skinwalker evidence the government doesn't want you to know about. Let me know down below if you've ever had an experience with something you thought was a shapeshifter, something strange. Shout it out down below in the comments, and let's dive on in. Number 5. CCTV footage. How on earth did we ever find cryptids and other paranatural beings before we started putting cameras on every street corner and inside everybody's pocket? If for nothing else, I've got to say the surveillance state era has made it way easier to find footage of weird things running around in the dark. Take a look at this extremely creepy footage that we found posted to Reddit. Recorded here is what someone described as a skinwalker caught on camera, and honestly I'm pretty inclined to agree. Let's roll it. Pretty darn creepy, huh? At first glance, you would totally be forgiven for thinking that's a demon or a dog monster. And it's only when you brave up and look through the cracks in your fingers, you're willing to take another look, you realize what you're watching is a human being running by on all fours, like perfectly like an animal. Whoever this is running on all fours better than I run on twos. This is one of the freakiest things I've seen in a good while, and I literally exclusively watch freaky content online all day, every day for my job, so it stands out. This one actually made me recoil. I've never seen a human being move like that. Well, allegedly a human. That's why we're including it in this video. Could this be a human? Or is this another being altogether? Some powerful shapeshifter caught mid-transformation, dashing through a Walmart parking lot at 2 in the morning? Now, there's not much information to be found about this, but I still did my digging for you just because I care. From what I could garner and gather, the footage was recorded in Mexico a few years back, at the start of 2020, and a few Redditors who were helping me out said that apparently it was a little bit of like a national meme. So if we have any Mexican viewers out there who can confirm or deny this and saw this footage and started laughing, I would love to hear from you about it, because I do want to get to the bottom of one of the weirdest things I've seen in a minute. Prank, hoax, real deal or not, I don't really know about that. But what I can guarantee you is that whatever it is genuinely terrifying. And if you're looking for loads more scary content of shapeshifters or all things paranatural, well, I like to think Top 5 Scary is the #1 place to be. We've got our fingers in a little bit of everything scary on the globe, so click through, find something to shriek at or fall asleep to, I'm not judging. Subscribe and stay scared, but finish this video first before you click away. We got more Skinwalker scares coming up for you. Number 4, stray dogs. So for most of these, I found some stories from people on Reddit who claimed that they had experiences with skinwalkers, and all of them are really cool stuff, so I thought I'd share them along with you. Our first one coming up is going to be someone who says this was a family experience they had. This happened to their brother, and I'll paraphrase it ever so slightly for content guidelines, but the story at large is mostly the same. In 2015, my brother worked for a security guard hiring place. I don't really know what you'd call it. Basically, he would call and they would station him someplace or another that needed it. So this particular time, my brother got hired by a local cemetery, as they'd had issues with people sneaking in, going so far as to even break a couple graves. No good? Anyways, his job was to drive around the cemetery and make sure no one was messing around. And this area was pretty rural and had a stray dog problem. Dogs would get lost, or people would abandon them and they would roam the countryside. One night, my brother was stationed at the cemetery and he noticed a big pack of dogs, around 8 or so. He said it was a good assortment, including a tiny little Bichon Frise that had the harness still on and a big old Rottweiler. My brother is driving around real slow and he has the window down when he hears the dogs going wild. And then he hears a sound he described as sounding like that screaming bird from the swamp episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Quick little aside, Taylor again. I hope that's a great frame of reference for you guys, because I've never seen that show, so I got no idea. Okay, story time again. He says he sees something fast and pale running in front of the headlights, and the dogs all start freaking out again. So he follows the dogs in fear that they're going to tear something up. He parks his car and he hears a faint call for help. He shines his light and he sees that the dogs have chased the deer, except the deer was pale gray, and emaciated. No antlers, and its eyes were completely pitch black. The Rottweiler tried to jump the deer but was thrown off. The creature screeched and then ran into the night on all fours. He never worked for that company again. Bone chiller, eh? What do you guys think? Too good to be true or too true to be good? Number 3, it tried to lure me. Now our next one is a personal recounting from someone who thinks that they might have encountered a creature up close when they were younger. Same deal as before, paraphrased ever so slightly just for timing and content guideline purposes, but otherwise intact and presented to you how it was presented. Every summer, my family and I go up to camp in Ellsworth, Maine, and it's about a 3-hour drive from my house. The camp itself is about an hour from the nearest town. I've been going here my entire life, and I've never had something strange like this happen before. I was watching TV in the middle of the night when I heard a noise coming from the kitchen, and I realized that the dogs were going to need to go outside to do their doggy business. So I took them outside. I walked to the front yard and I took the dogs off the leash. It's incredibly dark in the woods in Maine, so I tried to keep my eyes on them. I was momentarily distracted seeing a loon on the lake. When I looked back, I saw that the dogs were looking at something in the woods. I couldn't see what it was, but I just assumed that they'd seen a squirrel or a raccoon. It was then that I realized I didn't see my third dog. She's a small dog and she's completely black. I heard some whimpering, so I stepped out and called out to her again, worried that she got stuck somewhere. Suddenly, I felt something close to me. I looked down and my Alfie was there, I just hadn't seen her. So I started thinking, if Alfie was with me, what was it that I'd heard? The other 2 dogs began to growl. They were walking towards the blackness of the woods. I picked up Alfie and began to back up when I heard the most absolutely bone-chilling thing I have ever heard in my life. I heard something calling Alfie's name. It sounded like it was trying to mimic me, but it was just wrong. The voice sounded distorted. I ran inside with the dogs, and I have no idea what was in the woods. It's been said that a skinwalker's mimicry doesn't just extend to their ability to change shape, but also to mimic speech. Could this have been a close encounter? How else would someone in the woods know the name of the storyteller's dog? Something to think about, and something to keep you awake all night. Number 2, Skinwalker Sighting. This was posted to the Skinwalker subreddit. I stumbled upon this forum after my friend had sent me a link a day or 2 after I had told him my story on the res. This story is 100% true. Whether you believe me or not is up to you. I'm just sharing what had happened to me. This all took place a long time ago when I was much younger. I'm indigenous Mexican and Navajo. The cultural difference is somewhat large. I tend to practice my cultural roots within my Nahua side, but I'm also very close to my native family that resides in the States. My family had planned a trip to Arizona, and we'd made arrangements to stay with some family that lived on that reservation. Though, considering how small dwellings are on the res, my parents thought it would still be a good idea to stay at least a few days, and my brother and I would get to go see our cousins. The first day, being the moody teens we were, my cousin and I thought it would be fun to roam the open fields surrounding the res. We were hoping we'd get away from all the noise, and we ended up going off pretty far. Far enough that the houses were out of sight. About halfway back, we noticed a coyote off in the distance. Nothing weird, but we didn't want to get close to it. But that's when it got kind of weird. We heard someone whistling, calling from somewhere around the coyote, but it was something like you'd hear when someone was calling a dog back. It kind of spooked us, so we headed on back. The next day, I started getting headaches. As night rolled around, our parents were out, so my cousins and I played video games for a while until we heard footsteps outside. My brother wanted someone to look out the window with him. I did, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but then the noises started to come back. And I started to get the most painful headache that I've ever got. I remember crying and feeling so dizzy, never having felt that much pain before. The next day, I saw that same coyote again outside. The same coyote. It was bigger than most I'd seen, and it stared at me unblinking. I heard the same whistling. It had patches of fur missing and looking at me, and it made me feel so sick. I closed and locked the window and left the room. I thought of every mundane possibility. And us natives don't throw around the word skinwalker at every creepy experience. I promise. I just can't find an explanation for why I felt so bad and icky. Honestly, reading that one out loud again still freaked me out. Alright, I saved the best for last for you. Number 1. Our final entry is one last story from user Lisha Ninja to round out our Skinwalker story collection, and honestly, I think it's the spookiest one of the bunch, definitely the most high-octane energy action story. Let me waste no more time introducing and let's get into it. Lisha Ninja writes, "This is a story my family told me when I was growing up. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her two brothers were coming home alone when my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house and, like many people from the res, didn't have electricity. It'd been dark outside for about an hour and my aunt and uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside they heard noises, as if someone moving outside. My uncle went out to the front window and saw someone outside of his truck, which was out of the ordinary to say the least because the closest neighbor was miles away, and my aunt and uncle were frightened. They knew they had to take action. So my uncle took the rifle and readied himself. They flung open the door and aimed at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, unfazed by the drawn long arm. My uncle squeezed the trigger but nothing came out. The figure drew closer and closer and my aunt began to smell the stench of a dead body. It was so strange she started to gag. My uncle continued to pull at the trigger but nothing was coming out and the shadowy figure began to approach. Off in the distance, my grandparents were returning and their headlights shone up the road. This figure looked at the lights and started to move away. My uncle pushed forward to the truck with the rifle drawn. My grandfather got out of the car and my uncle pointed at the truck. My grandfather immediately ran inside, grabbed a handful of ashes and rubbed it over the gun's barrel. Whatever it was didn't expect this weapon to go off. My grandfather and uncle chased after the creature, and my uncle swears that when the headlights flickered on it, he saw a woman, but running on all fours the way a bear would. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch, it drops about 20 feet. He got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared, and that he knew it was her, and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed away. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, you say their name, and it'll end them. Whew. Well, my ghouls and goblins, that's about all she wrote. Thanks so much for taking a listen with me. Keep on creeping on as always, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.